Welcome you all tonight. Thank you for your patience as we waited for some people to be able to get in with our parking problems outside. My name is Amy Walmsley, and I'm the moderator for tonight's Road to Cleanup Forum, sponsored by Power Action Group. I'm an Asheville native, mother of 2 children, and live very close to the CTS site. All of us here tonight have a vested interest in seeing the CTS site completely cleaned up. Our theme for this evening is the Road to Cleanup. This means that we will be concentrating on ways and means that a comprehensive cleanup of CTS of Asheville site can be achieved. Tonight's forum is about putting energy toward how we are going to stop the uncontrolled release of these toxins and move toward a comprehensive cleanup. Before we get started, I want to introduce our elected officials and their representatives in attendance. Please stand and be recognized when I call your name. I'd like to note that our state senators and representatives are unable to attend this evening, not for lack of interest, but due to the fact they are still in session in Raleigh. We have David McCrary with Congressman Patrick McHenry's office, Matt Rumley with Senator Kay Hagan's office, Robin Ramsey with Senator Richard Burr's office, Roger Kump with Congressman Patrick McHenry's office, and Parker Sloan, he hasn't made it yet. He's coming with Senator Terry Van Dyne's office. Our county commissioners in attendance are David Gant and David King. Are there any other elected officials that we have attending that we did not get? Okay. We'd like to thank each of you for joining us and for your interest in our plight. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Bathrooms are located just out of the auditorium if you take a left, and they'll be down on your right. Please no food or drink in the auditorium, and please take a moment to silence your cell phones. If you need assistance with anything this evening, have questions regarding to any of tonight's information, or want to find out how you can get more plugged in, please see one of the presenters or people working tonight's meeting. For those of you not familiar with the background of the site, there's a brief timeline on the back of your agenda. I would like to now introduce to you our panelists for this evening. Please remember that our panelists are invited guests. Please extend them your respect while they're speaking and do not interrupt them. We'll have a question and answer session at the end, so please hold your questions until then. Tonight's speakers are Julie Mayfield, co-chair of Western North Carolina Alliance, Scott Lassiter, an environmental law attorney with expertise in the Superfund process, Frank Anastasi, a hydrogeologist with many years of regulatory and Superfund experience. He also serves as the technical advisor for Power. Samantha Urquhart Foster, the EPA's remedial project manager for the CTS site. Glenn Adams, a supervisory toxicologist with the EPA. Gibby Harris, the Buncombe County Health Director. And Katie Hicks, assistant director for Clean Water for North Carolina. Also joining us in the audience is Dr. Jeff Wilcox, hydrogeologist and associate professor at UNCA, Niall Testerman, environmental engineer with the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Angela Miller, EPA Community Involvement Coordinator, Rich Campbell, Chief Section B Superfund and Remedial and Evaluation Branch, Dion Delegati, EPA Congressional Liaison, and James Pinckney, EPA Media and Public Affairs Specialist. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Okay, Julie, we'll begin with you.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Julie Mayfield. I'm co-director at the Western North Carolina Alliance. We are the region's oldest grassroots environmental advocacy group, and I'm very happy to be sort of part of the power team, as I call it. I have been a public interest environmental advocate for 15 years, both here and in Georgia, most of my career in Georgia. What most people don't know about me, though, is that I started my career as an attorney at a private firm, working primarily on Superfund sites and at the federal level and state hazardous waste sites, hazardous response sites. So I bring a little bit of expertise, a little bit of extra expertise to this, and I'm, again, happy to put that knowledge at Power's disposal. But as a public interest environmental advocate, I understand being frustrated and angry with government. That is where I spend most of my time. I spend most of my time fussing at government, wanting government to do things, feeling like they're doing it too slow, and then sometimes when they don't do what we want them to do, we sue them. So I get anger and frustration, and I think we all know that this issue, this site, engenders a lot of anger and frustration. Perfectly understandable, legitimate, completely, I get it. We all get it. The question is, what do we do with that anger? And what we can sort of dwell on what has happened, or we can put that anger to work in moving this site forward. And what I want to suggest to you is that this site is now very firmly on the road to cleanup. It's not actually just an analogy, it's there. And in fact, in the last few months, in my experience, I would argue that it's been in the fast lane. It's been in the HOV lane, and it's moving. And so, again, I want to suggest that we, as a community, we take the anger and frustration that we probably all have about the history of the site, how it has been handled, what has or hasn't happened, and use it to continue to fuel this car that is now well on this road to clean up. There will be a time and a place, and there should be, to talk about the history and to get some accountability on what happened. But right now, as a community, we can be most effective in getting behind the momentum that the site has now gotten, and that you'll hear a lot more about tonight, and just get it on down the road. That's kind of where we need to be. So with that, let me just introduce the POWER team, as I call it. There is a great group of experts that POWER has assembled to help it be an effective advocate in this process. In addition to myself, and I've told you my background, Katie Hicks with Clean Water for North Carolina. Clean Water for North Carolina is a statewide environmental grassroots organization with an office here in Asheville. They have just an amazing track record of working with communities all across the state in cases like this and other cases where, again, citizens are being harmed by pollution. So she brings a great amount of experience. Scott Lassiter, as Amy mentioned earlier, is an attorney from Atlanta. Scott was actually one of my first bosses. I roped him into this, and he has many, many years of experience working on Superfund sites. On the private side, his posture would normally in a case like this be working for CTS, but he is bringing his expertise to bear on behalf of the community in this case, and we're very lucky for that. And then finally, Frank Anastasi, the technical advisor for POWER. So we've got technical, legal, community, and environmental expertise, and we are all very happy to be putting that to work on behalf of those of you who live in this community and have to deal with this site every day. Thanks very much. Two people very important that I forgot. The leaders of POWER would be Pat Dunn and Leanne Smith, how could I forget that? Nothing would have happened without those two, and of course their son, Gabe, who has also put a lot of energy into this. So with that, I will turn it over to Leanne.
Thank you, Julie. As Chair of POWER and as a fellow community member, I want to welcome you all here tonight. Like many of you, my family has been severely impacted by the CTS of Asheville site. And nearly every day I talk to or receive emails from other people who are in harm's way. And these people, like me, don't understand why cleanup still has not occurred. POWER Action Group was formed to direct time, energy, and resources toward achieving a comprehensive cleanup of the CTS site. And POWER, which stands for Protecting Our Water and Environmental Resources, is a grassroots organization founded on the principles of environmental justice. There's been, as Julie mentioned, there's been a lot of anger and frustration because many of us have family or neighbors or friends or all of those who have gotten sick. And yet, unconfined contaminants continue to release into our groundwater and air. And the reason we're here tonight is to do something about it. We will not sit idly by while industrial refuse dumped many years ago threatens the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the soil in which we plant our gardens. We're here tonight because methodologies exist to stop the release of these contaminants and eliminate the source that threatens our community. We're here tonight because this is about people's lives. And it's time that the road to cleanup be paved with real and tangible actions that will mean healthier lives for the people of South Asheville. It's time because squishing my toes in the mud or drinking a glass of water or just breathing the air around me should not mean a health threat. It's time that the safety and well-being of our children come before corporate convenience. It's time that we cut through the bureaucratic red tape to fast-track source removal actions. It's time because we've had enough delays. It's time because we cannot afford to waste any more time. It's time to clean up the CTS site. And I welcome our next panelist, Scott Lassiter.
Thank you, Leanne. My one word tonight is checkmate. I was asked to, as Julie said, I'm a private environmental lawyer from Atlanta. I spend most of my time, most of the last 25 years, representing private parties, mostly corporations, in hazardous sites, not unlike CTS. So this is an unusual role for me. But it's one I'm enjoying quite a bit. I was asked to try to give an overview of the Superfund process and try to put some context into where this site is in that process. The statute and regulations and guidance documents for Superfund are thousands and thousands of pages long. I thought I had 15 minutes, but it turns out I only have 5. So I was trying to figure out how could I get this down to as simple an idea as I could. And the word checkmate kept coming to mind. Checkmate, of course, is means that a chess game is over. Checkmate is the thing that the winning player will say to his opponent when that final act is played out. I'm going to try to give you a very high altitude flyover of Superfund in the process and try to explain why it is that idea of checkmate keeps coming to mind. I acknowledge in advance that I'm also mixing metaphors here with the road to cleanup and checkmate, so hopefully I won't derail that larger metaphor. From a really high altitude perspective, the regulatory framework that governs CTS site is the federal Superfund law. Superfund has 3 components that matter to this site. Has a lot of other things, but the 3 things that matter to this site is a scheme for liability, power given to the EPA, and a body of regulations that govern how EPA carries out its work at a site like this. With regard to liability, the Superfund law makes parties like CTS jointly and severally liable for the cleanup of those sites to government standards. They are liable because they owned that site at the time the contamination occurred. They're liable because they were the party that generated the contamination. Superfund makes them liable regardless of whether they continue to own the property in the future. They remain a jointly and severally liable party. That's obviously critical to this site. With regard to the powers given to EPA, EPA is given a broad range of powers, including the power to investigate sites like this, to acquire companies like CTS, to turn over information, the power to order companies like CTS to do cleanup work, and actually the power to do the cleanup work themselves if CTS were to refuse, and seek money back from CTS in court, along with some very impressive penalties that those of us who are on the private side of this game have a great deal of respect for. Turning quickly to that body of regulations under which EPA carries out those powers, you have to pause for a moment and realize that it's not like EPA doesn't have anything to do. Their sort of master list of sites that they have touched one way or the other is something called CERCLIS, C-E-R-C-L-I-S, and there are upwards of 40,000 sites on that list. And that's just really a subset of the total number of sites that are out there. There are also state sites that never get to that list, and there are also other federal sites that don't end up on CERCLIS. So there's lots of stuff to cover. So under EPA Superfund regulations, what they have done is basically to break the world into two groups. There are emergency situations, and then there are national priority list sites. And if it's not an emergency or it's not a national priority list site, the EPA doesn't have a lot to do with it at this point, or beyond that point. Under its emergency authority, the emergency authority leads to something called a removal. That's Superfund speak for a limited, fast cleanup designed to address an emergency situation. An emergency is usually a threat, an actual threat to human health, or a material threat to some important environmental resource. Again, that emergency removal activity is fast, at least in the world of Superfund, but it's limited to that emergency that's at hand. And once that emergency has been put to rest, the action ends at that point. With regard to sites that make it onto the national priority list, that NPL list, there's a much broader process that is not so fast, in fact, to people who are living around one of those NPL sites. It can be rather slow, but it is very complete. And at a site like CTS that is now tipped over at an important point, it's inevitable. So the cleanup that the NPL process is going to require at this site is now something that has become something that will not get, that horse will not get back in the barn. There's an alphabet soup of steps, from preliminary assessments to site investigations to remedial investigations, on and on and on and on. I'm not going to try to go into that with the less than 1 minute I now have left, but I'll tell you that this site has now passed the point where it is clear that it's not coming off the NPL, it's not going to be delisted. EPA has emergency powers at their disposal, and to the extent that specific emergencies are found, and for those problems that don't classify, don't qualify as an emergency, EPA has the ability and is now underway with this process that is going to lead to a complete cleanup, and the cleanup is going to be to those federal standards. And to kind of go back to my analogy for a minute, if you've ever seen chess, or even seen in the newspaper chess games being reported, you'll notice sometimes at the very highest level, chess games seem to end really, really quickly. There'll be 14, 15 moves into the game, 2 or 3 pieces will be taken, and the player will say, "I concede." Sometimes, however, those high-level chess games go on and on and on and on because they play it out all the way to the very end. What's going on there is that good chess players can look at that board early on and realize what's happening. Some players, just like some corporations, like to say, you know, checkmate is unavoidable at this point. We're just going to go ahead and concede that and move on. Sometimes chess players and corporations decide to play it out to the bitter end. Sometimes they do that because they might hope that maybe there's some mistake that the other side's going to make. Sometimes they do it maybe because they just can't bring themselves to accept the fact that checkmate is inevitable. Sometimes they do it simply because they don't have anything else to do but play that game of chess. And if they concede at this point, they got nothing else to do. What we've seen at this site in the past, I believe, is CTS playing that game, playing the game well. And you can say that cynically, or you can say that it is a justified act, but they were playing the game well. I think now that you'll see that because checkmate has become obvious, I think the process will now accelerate. And we won't see the sort of delays we've seen in the past. At least that's my hope. I'll turn it over now to the Powers technical advisor, Frank Insight.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. I'm really happy to be here. As I was introduced, my name is Frank Anastasi, and I grew up in the South. I was born in Memphis and lived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I learned early on, my mom would explain our name down in the South, Anna Stacy. You know, it's like two female names, Anna Stacy. It just happens to be our last name. So Anna Stacy, that's me, Frank Anastasi. I am an environmental consultant. I'm a hydrogeologist by training. I've been in the environmental investigation and cleanup business my entire career. I've never looked for oil or gas. That's why I don't have any money in the bank. Never found uranium. I've been an environmental investigation and cleanup guy since I got my first degree in 1980. My first Superfund site experience was in 1985. So that tells you I've been around a long time doing this kind of stuff. Primarily I work on private sector assignments, but I do a lot of community support work, technical advising, at military sites where communities are interested in the future use and the cleanup of the contamination, and at EPA Superfund sites where EPA makes money available for community groups to retain an expert. And so I come into a lot of situations like this where there's a situation, there's several sides, there's a bunch of information or there's no information, and people want to know, what's the deal, Frank? And so I look at it, I size it up, and I try to give them my opinion. And I really pride myself on trying to be neutral and just try to be technical and stick to the facts. And then that goes where it goes. So that's what I want to do tonight. I really appreciate and want to thank y'all, whoever's involved, everybody's involved in letting me be part of this. I love to do this kind of work. I love to help people leave a meeting like this, understand, read a newsletter or something we prepare, and understand, feel more comfortable with what they're living with, because you have to live with the Superfund site in your community, and it really doesn't matter how good a job they do, cleaning it up. If you don't understand what happened, and if you don't feel comfortable that maybe it wasn't cleaned up to your satisfaction, but you understand that the real risks were taken care of, or maybe whatever, if you go away knowing and feeling better about it, then it's a success. But if communities aren't comfortable with the aftermath of the Superfund cleanup, it hasn't been successful. So I like to contribute to that success. What I want to do tonight is summarize the recent work that CTS's consultant, AMEC, has done, and briefly, and then bring us up to date about what's happening next. And EPA will talk about these new initiatives they announced in July to actually get on the ground and start addressing the off-site releases. Now I have to tell you though, I've got summaries of data that we're going to put up, and I've got interpretations, but we weren't provided all of the data. The reports I've got had to have certain things scrubbed to protect people's information. And also, I'm interpreting other people's work from incomplete reports. It's not like I was the AMEC project manager who's up here explaining what we did and what we found. If I was, that person would do a lot better job than I will, so I'm not going to get into that level of detail. A lot of times, that's what you have here. So I'm kind of standing in for that person, but instead, what I'm going to do is, first on this first slide, I'm going to show you a summary of the data that was, this was collected in one of these two investigations. One of the things they wanted to do was see if there's still a lot of TCE in shallow soil, above the water. So this is soil samples and its high levels of TCE. I selected the data that shows the highest TCE. And these are the depths, 12 feet. This is all shallow. The water table now is 10 to 15 feet. So you have this 10 to 15 foot thick section of soil that has moisture in it, but it's primarily not saturated with water. So they found a lot of TCE. And the highest levels, except for this one here, which is an unusual occurrence, the highest levels are right around where the water table is, 15 feet. So that tells you something. Most of the locations are under the slab of the old building or south of there. But there's some other locations. The next slide, Gabe. The other thing they did was they went out and explored deeper. And they looked at the soil all the way down to about 50 feet. The soil varies in thickness, and then you get to weathered bedrock. But right around 50 feet is how far they looked in this recent round of sampling. And this is called the NAPL investigation. NAPL stands for non-aqueous phase liquid. Think of oil and water. They don't mix. So this petroleum and TCE NAPL doesn't mix with the water. So they went out to see how much of this stuff is there, what's there. And here's what they found. These are water samples that they sampled at specific places along with depth in the boring between where they started and 50 feet or so. And then next to it is an adjacent soil sample. Again, that's a 20-foot depth corresponding to a 22-foot depth of groundwater. In this case, they found, guess what, a lot of TCE in the groundwater and in the soil. Some of the highest TCE level, this is the highest number I've seen in all the reports, 1.12 million parts per billion of TCE in a soil sample at 30 feet. You have a lot of TCE in groundwater at depth, 40, 49. This is the deepest sample, 50 feet down. You've got groundwater with 15,000 parts per billion of TCE. So again, look at this, in the soil, 92,000 parts per billion, 49,300 parts per billion of TCE in the soil with depth. So, what does this tell us? Okay, what I wanted to do was try to combine data that has been generated previously in 2009 and 10 and even some back to 2004. The data that CTS's consultants have put together, and I wanted to combine it with some of this new data to try to show you what was going on. If I was AMAC, CTS's consultant, I would have done this in the office with, drafters and my field guys, and they would have crunched all the numbers and done programs, and they would have done pretty pictures. Instead, you get what I've got, but what we've done is that map shows places where we're going to show you a cross-section. And so if you think if you could just cut open the earth and drop one side down 50 feet and then look at it. Like driving through the mountains in a road cut. That's what we're talking about. We're going to look at a cross-section. We're going to look at line A prime, and B prime, and C prime, to give you an idea of where the contamination is. And again, this is the plant. Okay, so Gabe, the next slide. The new data is in the yellow, and the new data sampling locations are in yellow. The old data is just typed, like over here. So what we see again, what did we learn in this investigation? There's a lot of TCE in the soil and water. It's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. And it's deep. And it's primarily located under the building. That's the old building slab. Look at these numbers. This is the number from 2009. These are the numbers in water in 2014. So again, there's a lot of TCE, and it goes deep. This is off-site, 35,000 parts per billion TCE in deep off-site groundwater. This is the spring area that we're concerned about that's had the high air values because it's high in the shallow groundwater. The groundwater is flowing from the site and exiting in those streams. But it's also flowing deep in the bedrock and flowing off the site. So, the new studies confirmed what we knew in 2009 and 10. There's a lot of TCE there. It's in the groundwater and the soil. It's primarily around the plant area, but it's definitely leaving the site in shallow groundwater and in deep ground. So what's the next slide? So this is another cross section. Yes.
Okay, let me talk about it. So this is a site viewing map, a map of the site. And this is what the new investigation, what CTS consulting has determined. Here's the area where we have this non-aqueous phase liquid, this oily goo. It's free. There's a well out there with 6 feet of it floats on top of the groundwater. And they sampled some of it. But also, it's in places where you couldn't measure it floating on the groundwater, but it's there as a sheen, and it's also, like, you know how oil is. It's coating soil particles. It's infiltrated the pore spaces in the soil. And now if the water's come up, because we found the water came up higher than it used to be, it smeared this oily residue all over, so we had this big mess. And what we found out also is there's a lot of TCE in this liquid material, and in the residual material that's coating the shallow soils. That's kind of a new thing. That's not typical. So that means you've got petroleum and a TCE, residual mass. You've got rain and snow melt constantly falling on this thing. It's flowing down and flowing out in the shallow groundwater. It's going off the site, both to the east and the it goes down these draws. It goes this way to the southeast and goes this way to the northwest. For instance, even though they're drawing this heavy contamination down here, there's a sampling point up here where you have a lot of TCE in the soil and also in the groundwater. There's 19,000 parts per billion groundwater at 49 feet of it. Here, up here. So that means the groundwater is going that way and this way, and then it's going down deep and through fractures. But the other thing I found in old reports, there were PCBs found, up to 240 parts per million PCBs in soil and oxide sediment. When we go to plan this comprehensive site investigation, one of the things that's very common in old industrial plants, you have PCBs, which were chemicals that absorb heat. People use them in manufacturing, they use them in electrical transformers. Every old industrial site has PCB contamination. People put the waste PCB containing oil in their waste solution. They spread them on dusty roads, they keep the dust down. Everybody did it. It wasn't right. But I'd like to see good sampling over this entire site of PCBs because they're there. I don't think they were ever remediated. I don't think it was ever run down. So you need to remember, don't forget PCBs. PCBs bad, PCBs bad too. So the next slide. This is a sample or a couple samples that were analyzed from this free oil that they bailed out of the well, this NAP, the non-aqueous phase liquid, the oily stuff, it's full of PCB. And what they found was, this was really impressive news to me. It was news to me. There was a lot of trichloroethylene, up to 35%, 33, whatever it says, 33.8. So you have this both petroleum and TCE and other things. Good stuff. There's a lot of the product. There's also other things. We're really puffed up on TCE because it has it's very bad. But some other things are pretty bad too. Naphthalene and phenantine, they're carcinogenic. There are different classes of chemicals, but they're related, they're bad. And there's a lot of it. So you got to deal with this as a liquid, a free liquid, that maybe you can bail out or pump out. And you got to deal with it as this sludgy, gooey stuff that's soaked all soil particles and in all the pore spaces, and at least down to 50 feet that we know currently. It's probably deeper and probably entrained and down in the bedrock fractures and cracks. But this is a big step forward. We know the chemistry of what we got to deal with. They're going to suck it out of the ground and treat it, dispose of it as hazardous waste, they need to know what's in it. If they're going to destroy it on site, they need to know what they're going to do. So this is new. This is something we know. The next slide, Dave. This is I'm adding some new data to a 2004 drawing from a report. MapTech is what ENIAC used to speak of. And I want to point out, these are the recent sampling locations. These are the old sampling locations, 2004. Before, this was a bad number, 830,000 parts per billion of TCE in soil at that depth, which is about 60, 70 feet, I don't know, 50. This line's about where bedrock is. That's the water table. So here, 830. Well, look what we found 10 years later. 10 years later. Even higher. This is the highest number I think I've ever seen. 1.12 million parts per billion of TCE in soil. So, hadn't gone anywhere in 10 years. It's still there. We've got to do something about it. Next slide. Go back to this side. What I want to get at now is, so what do we have? What do we really have? What we know now is that we have a very serious Superfund site.
We have multiple media contaminated groundwater in the soil. We have deep bedrock contamination off-site. We have multiple directions of migration of the contamination through the groundwater. It's going into the surface water in the springs and the streams, and it's going through the fracture zone. We're not sure where, but we know that it's been tracked as far as 2/3 of a mile away in deep fractured bedrock groundwater. So that's a complex site. It needs to be addressed. And what they recently found was with the air sampling, we had exposure pathways to receptors. People were breathing harmful levels of TCE that's coming out of the water into the air. So EPA stepped in and evacuated those families, and now they've ordered CTS to come up with work plans to do two important things. This is really great news. They're going to do something to bring down the concentrations that's in the shallow water and the off-site properties where people were evacuated. So hopefully those people go back to their homes, but only when it's safe. And they're going to come up with a plan to test cleanup technologies to deal with that residual blob of source material that we know is in the 0 to 50 foot. It's 10 to 45 feet thick. So that's a big blob of residual contamination that has to be addressed. EPA has now asked CTS, give us your work plans. They're due in a few weeks, and they should be working on that this late summer and fall. So those are good things. The other thing now is what we have to do next is we have to plan this site-wide RIFS. This is all laid out in the order that EPA and CTS agreed to in January 2012. There's a typical process. Scott mentioned the Superfund process, and it's got a process. You basically want to lay out everything you know about the site, say what do we not know, go out and find a way to find those answers to those questions, resolve uncertainties is what we call it, and then find the problem, understand the problem, and then fix it, find fixes. And what's left besides dealing with the off-site immediate exposures that are going on, dealing with the residual stuff, the big thing about the RIFS is this deep bedrock groundwater problem. There's probably very high levels of TCE, if not pure TCE, down in the bedrock. It's in a fractured pattern. It's going who knows where. We've got to find that out, and we've got to try to attack the source of that, and then stop it from migrating, and stop it from contaminating people being exposed to it. So now we're going to go to this couple slides. EPA has established for years, back in the 90s when I did this kind of stuff, we were all wanting to do it quicker and faster because it took 6 months to go out and drill holes and get the data back from the lab, write a report, send it to EPA. EPA reviews it, sends it back and says, we don't think you did enough, we don't know about what's over here or over there, go drill more over there, go drill deeper. So we have to write work plans and send those in. It takes months and months and months, and then you go out and do more data. But EPA and the Defense Department, people got together, contractors. I used to be part of a big industry group called the Hazardous Waste Action Coalition. We worked together to try to make faster investigations. And EPA's coined several terms. DOD has also, but expedited site characterization. Do it quicker, faster. And the key thing is you think on your feet, you work together, you establish teams together and talk to each other and work together. Like you have weekly conference calls. What did you learn today in the field? What should we do next? You don't spend months and months and months. So I'm hoping EPA pulls something like this out of their bag of tricks. Because they have a number of them in the Superfund program. This triad approach. Triad is go to the next slide, please. It's this little three-pronged thing, and it's got a smart, systematic planning, and then there's a dynamic work plan where you talk to each other and work. It's like normal, like if you weren't in a regulatory process and you wanted to build a house or build a highway, and problems come up, you figure it out and you keep going. So there are these other. This is a recent thing, 2010, and it's EPA defined the best management practice, and it's the systematic project planning, beginning of an RIFS, right where we are. Perfect for y'all right now. To really put a lot of resources into planning this thing, establishing a different kind of program, a new mindset, to really work together and catch up for and overcome the delays and finish this quicker and cheaper. Key ingredient, CTS has to want to cooperate. They can't have to, they can't stay back and make EPA sue them, take them to court and threaten this action and delay. They need to come in and be a partner, and you could really see this thing done quickly. I've seen very similar sites, incredible amounts of work done in 2 years.
from RIFS beginning to actual cleaning up. It can be done, but it takes cooperation. And this is a simple graph that shows the green line is like a typical RIFS approach. You plan something, you go out and you do it. You write the report, you send it in. Oh, we need more data, we need to go back out, you do more. And I'm not making fun of this, I did all this. And they go on for years and years and years. But look at this. If you're a scientist or a mathematician, this is the amount of labor and money under the curve. There's calculations you can do. But anybody can look at this and say, there's a lot more area under that green curve than there is the orange. The triad approach, that kind of an approach, whatever you want to call it, you spend more resources planning, getting together, organizing your team. Everybody commits. And it takes commitment. But then it tails off. You learn what you need to know more quickly, you get it done faster, you get remediation going, and overall, less time and effort. But it takes willingness up front and cooperation. But it can be done, and EPA has established these programs, and it'd be great to see it here. I think this is perfect. Next slide. So what I want to leave you with is, again, I said, the big problem with the RIFS, the big focus should be this deep fractured bedrock, because it's intricate, it's not defined, it's not like a sandbox in Florida or Long Island with groundwater flows, it's easy to tell where. If you just change the P to a T, this is CTS. You have a source area, a lot of contamination under the old plant, it's gotten down and fractured bedrock, it's going who knows where. Okay? Shallow ground is flowing this way and taking it in a dissolved phase like this, let's say down to the springs, but it's going deeper and going off-site to those wells that are 3/4 of a mile away. Next slide. Again, this is the CTS site. I couldn't have drawn a better picture. You can get better with the next slide. But this is from a generic presentation on the Dean Apple site. Dense non-aqueous takeover. The TCE that sinks, gets in the fractures, then the water washes through it and pushes it in all these different directions. This is a generic site like that. A person gave this presentation 4 years ago. But this is what we know. So we all know this. This is what we're dealing with. You got the source area that's gone down. Now groundwater is moving through groundwater. Shallow groundwater is moving this way. Deeper groundwater. This is the high concentration that's still in the cracks. The TC that's still dissolving in the water. TC in water is just like perfume in a room. You know, you open perfume anywhere in your house, it wants to spread out because of the laws of nature. And you'll smell it in another room. The TC is trying to get out of the water, and get out of where it's highly concentrated, and mellow out and just go in, seeking equilibrium. So it's in the dissolved phase, going to go wherever it can go, and water transporting it will take it wherever it's going to go. Next slide, this is my last slide. I'm sorry, this is taking too long. This again, this is not the CTS site. This is a generic, it's a real site, but it's a presentation somebody did 4 years ago. Never heard of CTS, never been there. But this is the CTS problem. You got your source area at a high spot, you have all this residual, highly concentrated stuff. You have shallow groundwater here, shallow groundwater is flowing like this, it's coming out in the springs, it's coming out in the stream on the other side. And guess what? It's going down deep, and it's showing up in the well. And guess what? On that cross-section CC prime, off-site, way off-site, beyond the springs, 35,000, is that the number again? 35,000 parts per billion TCE at 218 feet in deep bedrock, that far off-site. That's what's got to be addressed in the RIFS, and we can do it. And I really hope that CTS will come in and be a true partner with EPA and the community and do some cool stuff soon, because it can be done. And I think that's in my presentation.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Samantha Urquhart Foster. I'm the remedial project manager for the CTS of Asheville E. Superfund side. I don't have any slides, and I just want to talk briefly about what's already been presented. I appreciate Scott's relation or analogy to a chess game. I wish it were that easy, but it's not. We can't just say checkmate. We're dealing with multiple people, multiple entities. It's not just a one against one. We have to interact with multiple people and come to a conclusion or a solution together. I wish it were as easy as saying checkmate, but it's not. And to Frank's analogy of, oh, this is simple, this is how it should go, it's not that easy. This site is complicated. It's got complex geology. We have evaluated it to an extent. We are developing cleanup plans. We are working at expediting cleanup plans. We have asked CTS to provide us with cleanup plans within the next, or by August 11th, to address the contamination in the springs, which will address the air contamination, and also to expedite looking at cleanup plans for the NAPL investigation, or the NAPL contamination. It's not as easy as people seem to portray it, but we do have the same goal in common. We want to see the cleanup happen as soon as possible. We are working towards that. I am way behind the time schedule, so I'm going to limit my comments. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to talk to them afterwards.
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate folks being here tonight. I think it's important as we move through this process to hear from lots of different people about their perspective on this, and I think that's helpful to us as we consider what needs to be done and how we need to act. One thing you need to understand is that once EPA is involved, the role of the county from a legal standpoint basically goes away. But I want you to also understand that this county, especially the county commissioners, have done everything that they can possibly do to support the people that live around this plant. One of the first things that was done was the plant building being taken down. That was accomplished a couple of years ago. In addition to that, the county commissioners approved for us, through the health department, through our environmental health division, to test wells outside of the 1 mile radius. That is testing that EPA is not able to do at this point. So just as an example, the tests we do on wells when people call us outside of the radius are volatile organic chemicals, and we are testing about 45 chemicals when we go out and do that water testing. In the past 6 months, we've done a total of 21 well samples, 16 in the past month. So the issue with the air quality out there has spurred interest, I think, in people getting their wells tested. Most of those have been non-detect. We've had a few incidents where we've had issues and we've dealt with those homeowners specifically. Just so you know, and I'll make sure that this gets out to Leanne so she can post it, but if you need your well tested and you haven't had the ability to do that, please call 250-5016. And we will make sure that staff get to you quickly and get your well tested. In addition to that, the county has funded a water line extension project for those people within the CTS, within the 1 mile radius. They're applying for the county's applying for funds from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We have been assured that those funds are going to be available, but at this point in time, we're moving ahead with the project. It's a 365-day construction contract. The project cost is $1,644,555. The start date was March 20th, 2014, and the completion date is March 19th, 2015. The general contractor is TK Utilities, and we've got a subcontractor, PAC Construction. There is a total of about 14,200 linear feet of main water line that's being laid, and 47,000 service line, which is the distributions directly to houses, with a total of 156 meter services that are going to be hooked up as this moves forward. There's a whole process here. I'm not going to go through that in the interest of time, but just want to let you know the areas or the roads affected by this include Rouse Lane, Walsh Trace Drive, Chapel Hill Church Road, Bethel Road, Braver Drive, Russet Lane, School Road, Mariah Lane, Wineberry Lane, Forest Run Drive, and Fox Run Drive. The current status is the main waterline construction's been completed on Brayburn, Walsh Trace, Russet Lane, Forest Run Drive, and Fox Run Drive. They're currently working on Mariah Lane and anticipate that being completed fairly soon. Over 2/3 is completed at this point. Customer service lines and tie-in is currently occurring on Walsh Trace and Russet Lane. I do have the name of the contract administrator. If anybody's interested in that, you can speak to me afterwards. So I think the point that I want to make about all of this is the county's committed to supporting this community and advocating in ways that we can as we move through this process and EPA is able to complete the cleanup of the site. We welcome comments and thoughts from the community. If there's more that we can be doing than we're doing. When the EPA is here to talk about health issues, we try to be present and support in any way we can. So you have, I think at some point my email address was up online. My direct telephone line is 250-5211. I welcome calls from the community at any point in time and look forward to continuing to work towards cleanup of this site. Thank you.
All right, I know folks are anxious to get to the question session. I'm sure a lot of people have questions, so I'm going to keep this really short. I'm Katie Hicks with Clean Water for North Carolina, and I just wanted to bring a little bit of statewide perspective on the site and identify a few ways that you can get involved. I know it says I'm talking about goals, but really what I'm talking about is the ways to get to those goals, because I think everybody wants a safe community, a full-scale cleanup as quickly as possible. So I just wanted to say that, you know, our community here is not alone in that there are tragically many communities facing toxic contamination in groundwater and air, obviously throughout the country and also throughout the state of North Carolina, although this site is certainly one of the worst. And I just wanted to address that in working with community groups throughout the state. One thing we found is that working together, organizing together to stand up for your environmental rights, the community can be a very powerful advocate for yourselves and voice. And as Gibby said, you know, we all advocate how we can. I think one of the strongest positions for a community is to organize together and to identify that there are a lot of different tactics, a lot of different steps along this process. I wish it was the case that these things just took care of themselves and everybody did what they were supposed to do, but it's not, and I think we've seen that at this site. So I wanted to mention that in case you have to leave early or before the Q&A is over, there is one thing that you can do this evening, which is to fill out a postcard, and those postcards are going to be sent directly to CTS, urging them to remove the source that is causing all of these toxic carcinogens to go into the environment and the community. And there's a place on that card where you can let them know how this has personally affected you and your family, as I know a lot of folks in the audience have really experienced this tragedy. And also, you can become more involved in the efforts of Power. They do welcome folks and will be continuing to identify what needs to happen, how can we best make it happen. I believe the next meeting is set for Thursday, August 7th, but I don't think the date and time are confirmed, but you can email info@poweractiongroup.org to get that, or if you signed up and checked a box out front as well. So I just kind of wanted to give that perspective, and now I'll turn it over for the Q&A session. Thanks.
Thank you to all of our speakers. Before we begin the question and answer session, I just want to quickly reiterate a couple of points. Tonight's meeting is about how to achieve a comprehensive cleanup of the CTS site. We ask that you kindly keep your questions to current events and issues pertaining to the future of the cleanup. If you have a question or comment dealing with the history of the site, please contact the appropriate person following the meeting. During this time, there will also be a clipboard coming down your aisle for you to sign up to receive information from Power and to stay plugged in on the progress being made with the cleanup. If you have a question, please form a line here at the microphone. Questions should be short and to the point and kept at less than 1 minute. We have a timer to help you keep track of your time. Once your question is asked, please step away from the microphone and do not interrupt the speakers as they are answering. You will direct your questions to the panelists, but more than one panelist may respond with an answer.
Good evening, everybody. My feedback. My name is Barry Duran, and I'm part of the community advisory group for the Mills Gap Road groundwater contamination site. I've been involved in the site since 2007. And one of the things that I think maybe got left unmentioned here, I know, Frank, I saw that chart that you had from 2004, which showed the 830,000. That was actually from 2001. And that triggered an emergency response order back in 2002 that gave EPA the authority that it has now under circular law to act under the ERT program. And I'm sure, Scott, maybe you've had a chance to take a look at that, but what I'd like to encourage and urge is that everybody in this community place pressure on EPA to fulfill their own mandate under that document. And if anybody has questions about that document, you can certainly email me at barryduran@yahoo.com. But I would urge this action be taken under the ERT program, because the other thing that hasn't been fully discussed is the topographic high where this contaminant exists. It has potential energy to spread, and that's what was recognized in 2002. So I just wanted to complete that. Thank you.
Are you going to be accountable for this?
Anyway.
I would like an answer if that's possible.
Why haven't you done anything after 2002 when you were mandated to do it? Why haven't you done anything? Is that your question, Mr. Durant?
That's my question. Circle law.
Okay, we have done things in 2000, from 2000. They did a soil vapor extraction system that removed volatile chemicals.
We can't hear you.
Samantha, there's a line right there. You don't have to. Under the removal action, they did a soil vapor extraction system that removed volatile chemicals from the soil until it reached asymptotic levels. And after that, we began the remedial investigation. We are currently looking at additional cleanup options under Emergency Response Removal Authority.
Just to say this, that order gave a 6-month period of timeline from April 2002. The SVE system didn't get implemented until 2006. It got negotiated in 2004. You had authority, you still do have authority, to address the primary concerns of that order, which were the concern that this would migrate off-site over time. And I advise you, and I wrote a letter to Gina McCarthy to take a look at this. She doesn't have the familiarity with the site you do. That's the administrative EPA. But I urge you to act on that fast authority, because you have it. It's in the document. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Robert Sells. I live at 183 Treetops Lane, and I also own Lot 11 in Southside Estates. Question that probably can best be answered by Dr. Harris. I understand that the county has appropriated, as you indicated, $1.6 million towards the running of water lines. I'm curious as to why the taxpayers and citizens of this area have to pay for something that was clearly the result of contamination, and the contaminator isn't paying for it.
I think that's an excellent question. What I can tell you is that we're at the point where we felt it was important for the people in the area to have city water.
Oh, no question, Dr. Harris.
And at this point, we realized, and with working with our county commissioners as well as with some of our legislators in the area, that there was opportunity to apply for a grant to help fund that. So we could have waited until CTS was willing to do that, which we didn't know whether they would be or not at any point in time, or we could go ahead and apply for the grant and get the water lines in to support the community, and that was the decision that was made.
No, I laud your decision. It's simply that I think we need to press the contaminator, because you're asking people who had no part in creating the problem to pay for the problem.
I understand. I understand.
My name is Dr. Judith Sells, and I also live at 183 Treetops Lane, and we own the top lot of Eden Knifin and the Southside Estates, which was in part of the original 57 acres of the CTS site. I'm also an active member of the CAG, the Community Action Group, which was registered with the EPA since 2008. I have been informed of good news for everyone, and that is that the Western WESTON branch tributaries, the streams where the children have been playing, showed no contamination when they were tested. So the parents and their children who have played in these waters can stop worrying about being exposed to water contaminated by the CTS plant. I do have a map if you have any questions about the location. Those streams are separated by about a mile distance and 2 mountain ridges away from the CTS site. In present accountability, I have some concerns as this has taken over the focus of power instead of dealing with the victims, like the Rices and their neighbors, whose exposure to contaminants from the CTS site is so severe that some of them have now been evacuated from their homes by EPA without any determination as to when they will be able to return. Those who live in close proximity to the site may still be in continued danger. There is a grant that has been given, a technical assistance grant of $50,000 that was given to Power. It was originally offered to CAG, we turned it down. It was offered to Power, and it says, let me see. It states grant funds cannot be used to reopen or challenge final EPA decisions. We felt that this would prejudice us and put us in a position where we could not be honest with the residents in the community. I would like to know about the conflict of interest that this brings about. If the streams are not the issue, then what is the issue? The issue are the people who were victimized by this contamination. And they are still being victimized. We have people who are dying, we have people who are suffering, and the issue needs to be centered to clean this site up completely. Thank you very much.
So much of a question, but I would like to point out that that's what Power is asking me to help them do. Get the whole site addressed, and it includes people's health is the primary driver of this. But it includes air exposure because it's coming from the water. It includes those springs. And there hasn't been surface water sampling, to my knowledge, of the close-in surface water, the seeps in the spring, besides the Rice Springs. Even there. I don't know about recent surface water sampling, but I know there's a bunch of old historical surface water sampling that shows off-site surface water contamination, which try to be a concern of anybody that lives off-site. So I think that's going to be one of the parts of the site-wide investigation cleanup is surface water exposure pathway. Because right now, TC and other contaminants are getting into surface water and affecting whoever might be nearby. The streams you mentioned are further away and aren't impacted. That's great. You're right. That is great news. But I can tell you from my experience working on these kind of things and working as a tag under the EPA assistance, when they talk about challenging a final position, that means they couldn't use the grant money to hire Scott to lodge a lawsuit against me. And they couldn't hire me and expect EPA to pay them money for me to write an expert report that said the solution to the CTS that you decided on and proposed and got approved isn't valid. They won't pay for that kind of thing. But what they're paying for is unbiased, objective, technical interpretation. And I promise you, if you think I'm saying something that you think other people want me to say that isn't what I am interpreting from information that I'm gathering, I would love to talk to you about it, because I don't want anybody thinking that. I'm looking at what there is and trying to, you couldn't tell from my presentation, I'm really excited about this stuff. But I'm really trying to lay it out there. It is what it is. It's what we say. It's business. So there's no conflict of interest here. I'm not shading anything. I'm trying to help people get the site cleaned up by beating everybody in the head with these big numbers. You look on the posters out there, you look on what was on my slides, bright yellow, 1.1 million parts per trillion TCE, the drinking water standard is 5. That's what I'm trying to do. Summarize the data, so it's little here, little there, it's hidden here, it's hidden there. It's in a 2002 report, a 2001 report. I'm trying to bring it all to light and say, here's how bad this place is, here's how complex it is. Please, EPA, the boss is back. Get more resources on this project. Samantha's going to be overwhelmed with the screening work and the source area removal, testing all these alternative technologies. That's a lot of work quit. And that stuff, Barry, that is directly under that, agreed on that order. We need a whole other team to jump right on this site-wide RIFS and really go after the deep groundwater. I really ask EPA to make additional staff resources necessary to bring on this project, to have 2 parallel tracks. The existing stuff they just ordered, let's get the spring issue under control, get that air emissions down so that people can go back to their homes. Stop this migration from the site. I got a couple ideas about something else that they haven't suggested. And then plan this site-wide investigation for the deep groundwater and get going on it. Don't wait 2 years. If you look at the new timeline, it seems to me that, and it's probably resource, we can't do everything at once with this group. Let's get more people. So because you've got to start the site-wide groundwater. The deep regional groundwater, it's got to be number one. It's got to be. There's no reason to not start planning it right now.
I'd like to, still on Dr. Sell's question, I'm not a technical guy, so I think of things very simply. Power is very focused right now on the recent discovery that there is a large source area of contaminated material sitting at the top of the hill. The pictures that Frank put up there showed that large source area is still sitting at the top of the hill, and what the recent data has shown is that there's more of it than we thought before, and it's still there. The fire efforts, and there were significant fire efforts done, but those fire efforts didn't make that problem go away. Power would like to see all available resources concentrated on getting rid of that source material, because we think that getting rid of that source material is the key to being able to clean up the site effectively over time. That is Power's central focus. In addition to that, however, and I think EPA shares that focus, by the way. I won't speak to that. Yeah, I think that's actually what we're trying to do. In addition, I think we all want a comprehensive and complete cleanup. And the importance of this is there are actually 2 different tracks that have to proceed. This source, this bad stuff, can get addressed under that quick removal type power the EPA has. the comprehensive cleanup has to be done through their methodical process. You want them, as Frank was saying, both to be going on at the same time, but you shouldn't leave here tonight thinking anything other than the power. Number one prime focus is doing everything we can to cause all the parties involved to bring all available resources to get rid of that social threat.
My name is Aaron Dillon. I'm also a member of the CAG group. First off, Ms. Harris, I'd like to ask you a question. Thank you for the water lines for the county. It's been a long, hard road. 7 years we've been trying to get the water lines in. I'd like to ask also, in your testing, this goes 1 mile outside of the plant. Why are you not testing for heavy metals? It's my understanding heavy metals are a big part of what's in the contamination in the ground at the site. I agree it is not a chess match. From what I saw tonight with the generic pictures, the CAG group has been presenting for 7 years now, and we've not had generic pictures. We've had actual documentation that have been provided by the EPA and 60,000 documents that we've gone through painstakingly. As far as the money that goes from the CAG group, $50,000 is my understanding that has been paid by CTS. Why is that money not being used for starting the cleanup at the site? All the money that's been used for testing in the last, how many years have you been testing? The site's been here for over 24 years. Why have you not come to a conclusion yet? Why have the testing, why is there more testing and more testing and more testing? You come here tonight and you don't have time to sit here and talk to the people that have come to this meeting tonight to hear about what's going on. Why do you not have any answers? People want to know what's going on. People want to see the site cleaned up, and people are tired of just hearing, oh, we don't have time to talk to you. Thank you.
Response?
Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that I didn't have time to talk. I have all night to talk. We had an agenda with certain time frames. I didn't want to take over other people's time slots and your time. I'll be happy to sit here and talk all night with you.
Thank you.
More than happy to. We are looking forward to a cleanup. I'm expecting work plans coming from CTS on August 11th to address the air contamination as well as addressing the natural source area. When I get that information, I'll have more information to relay to you, but I'm happy to talk to you afterwards or if you have any specific questions right now. Just hold it. Yeah, just hold it. Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Paul Erickson, and I live in Hidden Valley Estates, which is right behind the CTS plant. I've got 3 questions. One is, my house is basically 200 yards from the plant. Why has no testing ever been done in Hidden Valley? That's my first question. No official testing. We actually had a neighbor that did some testing, and it was kind of scary. Second question I have is, what is the downside for CTS if they just ignore EPA and everybody else's efforts to get this cleaned up? Is there a big stick that EPA has they can hit them with or something like that? And the third question I have is it relates to the air quality over there. You closed down the bus stop at the entrance to our neighborhood because you didn't want the children breathing that. Of course, we drive through there in and out every day, and we're not holding your breath for that 15 seconds there. I don't know if that really takes care of the problem. Our neighborhood is concerned about whether our air quality is also compromised as the air down at the base of the neighborhood was.
Okay, to answer your first question about sampling done in Hidden Valley, we did air sampling adjacent to Hidden Valley and on the driveway into Hidden Valley, and the results were below an action level. The decision to change the bus stop was the county, and I'll leave that up to Gibby to answer. I forget what your second question was.
We don't have a problem with them changing the bus stop. The concern there was if it's that close, like my house is closer to the plant than the entrance to the neighborhood. But no one's ever gone in and taken a right-hand turn and tested up there in our part of the neighborhood.
Okay, I am not exactly sure where you live, but I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. We have sampled okay, so if you drive down Mills Gap Road past the plant, and then you turn right into Hidden Valley, we sampled not far after you turn in there, and the results were below a removal action level. We also sampled at locations near Hidden Valley, as well as a community member who lives in Hidden Valley had air sampling, and they were all below removal action levels.
Is there any possibility of getting sampling done in the neighborhood?
We think that the contamination is coming from the springs, and so what we've seen, the next step out from the springs has been below any action level, so we don't plan any in the future. But if we do get, we are planning to do additional resampling at those same locations. If we get elevated concentrations, we'll move out.
Whoa. The other question that you didn't respond to is what sanctions can the EPA impose on CTS to enforce compliance? What's your big stick? Or do you have one?
Yeah, sorry, thank you for correcting on that. We do have stipulated penalties in our administrative order with CTS if they don't comply with certain requirements that we require of them, that we can initiate penalties towards them. So if they don't agree to do certain actions, then we can apply certain penalties depending on what the thing
And
is.
are those severe enough to get their attention?
I believe so.
So like they got to do submission within 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If they decide not to do that or submit some vague response, what's EPA's position on addressing that?
Yeah, we're recently going through that. We issued them a bill for oversight cost, and they have not paid yet. And so we're going into stipulated penalties, which is $500 per day until they pay those costs.
Any chance to get that up to 1,000 or so, 2,000 a day?
Yeah, it starts out at 500, then it goes to 1,000, and it goes up. It depends on the number of days that they don't comply.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Terry Rice. I'd just like to make a statement, please. I live beside the site, and I'm one of 13 people relocated by the EPA because my air is unsafe to breathe. Ms. Foster, I want to share a few things and ask you a couple of questions. EPA and Power have been sending out emails and information to the press blaming my family for holding up the cleanup. Now, Congressman McHenry has sent a letter saying the same thing, that we've held up the cleanup. EPA trespassed on my property 24 years ago, found high-grade contamination coming onto my property after 2 letters were sent to EPA from the state. EPA never told us, and we were allowed to drink toxic water for 9 more years. It was not until 2013 the EPA admitted this. If EPA found it 24 years ago, how are we holding up the cleanup? In 1999, EPA designated our property as a superfund, making it look like it was our fault when EPA knew it was not. These people in power are more interested in their movie than our health or a cleanup. None of them have been on a well or breathed toxic air because none of them live near us. I spent the last 30 years paying off my piece of property, and now I'm one that has been relocated. My 30 years of paying is for worthless property. These people with power have told the story of our pain and suffering for their movie. How do you think that makes us feel? Your kids did not play behind the site or on my property. My daughter is one with these rare brain tumors. My dad is the one with a brain tumor. My mother has been sick. My brother has 2 young children playing where EPA found toxic waste in his backyard near buried barrels along the fence that EPA found in 1999. My mom's raising one of my grandsons, because my daughter's unable to. Y'all are not the ones that have worked for the victims. And EPA has never worked for a cleanup of what they found 24 years ago. To our community, this is about your moving and not much more of anything else. The people that have actually helped there, you have tried to ruin. None of the people trying to help my family took the $50,000 that was offered, because they would never take the money considering where it comes from. This power grid has not helped us, and now we have letters going out from McHenry and EPA saying that the site history starts in 1999. Why is that? Why has the power not corrected that? What about 1980 when the site was registered with CTS? What about 1985 when the state screened the site for EPA? What about what was found in 1987? What about when the site was declared a high priority by the EPA in 1989? What about the 1990 something that was not authorized and had EPA come onto my property, never asking for permission or telling us the results of the testing? Well, in 1995, EPA deleted the site existence. What about 1999 when our property was declared a Superfund site? Why is there no mention of it?
Mr. Rice, if you have a question, could you please get to that one?
Okay.
Thank you.
My area was told to be high above the levels in 2008. Why was I allowed to live from 2008 till now, 2014, with bad air?
Terry, my heart goes out to you and your family, and that's why Angela, Glenn, and multiple of us came to visit you to offer temporary relocation.
I am still on that temporary relocation.
I understand that, and I'm so sorry for what you've gone through. And we are here for you. Your air concentrations in 2008 were similar to what they were now, but the toxicity standards of TCE have changed. In 2008, those levels were considered safe.
Franklin Hill said no.
Science has evolved, and we know now that it's no longer okay for you to live there, and that's why we offer temporary relocation for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I wanted to add that, I don't know if members of Power wanted to say something as well, but I absolutely, again, my heart goes out to your family, and I believe that increasing communication in the community would be a good thing, because I know many of you who have been involved for a long time. I do think that Power is a group that formed because there's enough hurt in the community as it is with all these toxins, and really want to support each other and all help each other. And I know that some things have come out in the media, and I just wanted to say that as far as what I know, none of those came from Power, and I hope that you will, all stick around and talk to your neighbors, and I don't live far from the neighborhood, and I think that dialogue is better, and that being respectful of each other and what we've all gone through is the road forward.
I'd like to just say one thing to you, Mr. Rice, too. There you go, watch it. I'd like to talk to you personally sometime, later today or some other time, because I don't understand some of the things that you know. I'm a new guy here, right, February. But also, I'm certain that you don't understand some of the technical advisor grant program with EPA and the way Power has money. They don't even actually have any money. They don't have this money. When I send them a bill for my work, they send an EPA bill, and EPA sends them money and they pay me. I cut my rating a third. I'm doing this not like the end for free, but my rate is a third of what I charge in the private sector, because I really care about this stuff, especially about people like you. And so I want you, and what I said at the beginning, I really believe this. I've said it in every community I've worked in. I really want you to understand, and if I can help you understand this thing a little better, then that'll be maybe one thing that will trouble you less. Because I really want to help you understand that it's not, the power hasn't taken some $50,000 bribe to do anything. So I'd like to talk to you about that sometime. I really would. I'll come over, we can go out, we'll talk tonight, whatever. But I really want to talk to you one-on-one, so you should, it's unconscionable what's happening. I'm really sorry.
You said that money comes from EPA, but doesn't that money come from CTS?
You're right. You got to go to CTS, and then go to
All right, sorry. The money is paid by EPA and we request reimbursement from CTS.
Okay, so we're going to have time for these last 3 questions, but please be very conscientious of the minute allotment for your question.
Maybe I'll elaborate just 1 second longer. And this relates to the question about the county water cost, the tag money that passes through EPA's oversight costs, and all the cleanup costs. Ultimately, that bill can be given to CTS under superfund. That is ultimately their responsibility for all of these costs. And they will come, they will be either asked to pay for it, and if they decline, they'll be taken to court and forced to pay it, perhaps with punitive damage on top.
Thank you. Jerry Rice, I guess you noticed that I'm a video person, I've done it for a long time. But what you don't know, that I had a niece and 2 children of hers that was in the evaluation. So I have a stake in this game as well, because that's family. But I had a stake in it since 2007. The thing that I want to bring to the attention is this parent group is not got off the ground. It don't have the power that it thinks it's got. It never will have. The gag group that got started, that powered this thing up, is the power that came from the boots on the ground and the people that lived in the community. You might have expertise, but you don't have what it takes when you're one of the families that lives in it. So what I'm bringing to the forefront.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. That's a minute. Do you have a question?
That's another thing with the power group, is time limit. EPA does time limit. You got a moderator, time limit. You never let people get to the point, because everybody's not a lawyer, everybody's not a well speaker, but I'm well versed in politics, because the politics is what's driving this. It ain't EPA, it ain't you, it is politics. We do not have the governance of our politicians that...
Excuse me, sir. Let him finish. He needs another minute. I will donate my minute for this man to finish his statement.
Let him finish.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's okay. Now, this is the kind of reaction that you don't want. And I know that. Because what you're doing is not going to get what you need. Because the group that's done it is the one that's got it out. There's 200 people at July 12th meeting, or June 12th meeting. That was the power group. That was people that lived it. So I just want to share with you, if you want something done, you tell the politicians and hold them accountable for the contaminator that's up there in Washington that's taking the money, that's in the back room, that's feeding this animal that we're trying to kill. Because you're not going to get this cleaned up by the way you're going about it. You've got to have people that faces the devil and tell them they're a devil and get to it. You ain't going to play nice to these people and get nowhere. If you think you are, you might as well go back home. Now, right here is a email in July 6th wanting people to depart and come to y'all. This is from Samantha Foster, okay? This is bringing out the group called Power. This is dragging them away from the group that was originally formed for the very purpose intended tonight. Because we've already had a meeting nothing been discussed tonight that is new. This is all old. That's the reason you don't hear too much out here in all hands. Because it's humdrum. We've already heard this. And let me tell you, we had one of the best professors to lay it out, give the numbers, the facts and the figures. We ain't heard nothing new tonight. In fact, not as good substance as what we heard before. So if you want power, you need to take care of the people that was at the 200 group on June 12th. And you need to connect with them because they are moving it. And they're moving the politicians out of the way as well. Because that's what the problem is. The politicians are as crooked as they come. It's not EPA. We've got good people at EPA. We've got good professional people here.
I really am
We
going to
need
have to
politicians
cut it off
like
now. Thank you.
Kind of to Katie's point, the dynamic that we have here with two groups in the same community working for the same end, this is not unusual. There are dozens of environmental groups in this state that I work with on a daily basis, and we don't all do it the same way, and we don't all talk to the same people, and we don't all say the same things, but we all have the same goals ultimately, and it's okay for people to be working in different ways to get things done. You know, the power group is working with EPA, and we are working with our local elected officials, with our federal elected officials, state elected officials. We've gone to CTS, and we're trying to hold CTS more directly accountable now. There is no shortage of work to be done to get to where we all want to go on this site. And it's, the different ways that we do it are all going to get us down that road.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank everyone who's spoken tonight. Also just wanted to clarify a thing or two. The members of Power do live in the community and are living the site. So just wanted to throw that out there. And I did want to ask of the EPA if there were plans to also pursue the source of PCBs that are at the site and to remove and treat those sources. Thanks.
I just have one question.
Go ahead. Thanks, Gabe. I appreciate your comment, and we are looking towards the majority of the source is the TCE and petroleum products, and if there's any PCBs, I'm sure it's commingled in it, and that will be looked at as well. But the main contaminants are the TCE and the petroleum products, which we're going to go after first. And hopefully, if there's any PCBs that are captured as well.
I'm a local reporter, and this is not to be in the story, but I did want to ask a question. Okay, there's two different community action groups, Power, and I don't even know the name of the... CAG. Okay. Obviously two different groups. My question is, they both have a focus of getting the site cleaned up, as I understand it. But my question is, first of all, how many meetings has the Power Group had with EPA officials such as Franklin Hill, where the public wasn't invited in the last year? None.
This is the first meeting that we've had with EPA and Power combined.
No, maybe not.
But Franklin Hill says that he was here in September to meet with you guys. That's not a meeting, I guess. I don't know. I'm talking about a meeting. Power meeting with EPA officials.
We were in town, and Franklin Power had just formed, and Franklin just wanted to introduce himself to Leanne.
You guys never gone to the Power Group before, since that time in September, last September?
Quality meeting. Yeah, they're talking about another time. They're not talking about this.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand
In May.
your question.
Okay, no. But the public meetings is what I'm wondering.
Public meeting, we had a public meeting a few weeks ago, which is the first one that we've had in years at the Quality Inn.
Power as well as the other community group came.
So that was an introduction last September then, when you guys were just talking with Pat and Leanne, I guess, with Frank.
That was it. We were in town
The
to meet
super fun
with
grant.
Congressman Meadows and Ms. Rice, and
Do you remember that?
Jeff was there. And while we were in town, Franklin said, hey, can I meet Leanne and Pat? And it wasn't a public meeting, it was just an introduction.
I just was wondering about that, because I had never heard about that until just recently. You know, those are things that I would like to know. I mean, if it's a community action group, aren't you supposed to involve the community and keep everything open?
Well, that particular thing, we were in town to meet with Congressman Meadows, as Angela just said. And Power Action Group had applied for the technical assistance grant, and we had given it to them. So Franklin wanted to also meet with Power Action Group.
Okay.
So it wasn't like official public meeting.
And I would like to point out that the meeting Franklin Hill had wasn't public with us or anybody else either, with Ms. Rice and Congressman Meadows. That was a non-public meeting. So those happen.
And I think it's great that there's so many legislative aides and county people here today, because I didn't see them, and maybe I'm wrong, I could be wrong. I didn't see them at the Skyland Fire Department. I didn't see them at the other meetings, so I think it's great that they showed up for this one.
How about then you also talked with the administrator, Stan Leiker? He's not the administrator anymore, how could we speak with him?
We got to stick to the questions that are over here. That's why we have the process. You've been waiting a long time for this.
I'd like to respond to one thing though, because I've been part of one meeting with EPA, and that was May 12. And we had that meeting because I requested it. And it's what I normally do in these roles when I'm working in the private sector or whoever. If I'm working for an insurance company trying to settle a claim, if I'm working for a polluter trying to defend themselves, I'm trying to get information. My first task is review these two reports, the reports of the two investigations, the DNAPS, the NAPO study, and the soil vapor extraction study. We asked for the reports. Could you give me those reports? We'll get them May 5th. We had to request them under Freedom of Information Act, just like y'all did. No special treatment for this power. So I said, we immediately did it. How about a week, a week you get these reports, so we meet for a week and you can tell me what, and share with me what you could share with me. And so I can do my job, because they've asked me to tell them what I think. Because that's what they're asking me to do. What do you think of what CTS's consultants do? So I get it, they agreed to have a meeting, and that was great. And you know what? I don't know what went away from that, but in my mind, I gave them hell. I mean, I asked them, I told them, why are you so easy on CTS? You never that easy for me or my clients to work in the private sector. Mr. Lassiter showed them the 2004 order and said, you got this started right here to make them clean up. Why don't you? We went in there saying, do inter-removal action. Go in here. And I said, how are you letting this thing sit with oxide exposure? And they said, what do you mean? The groundwater, nobody drinks water. We spill groundwater. I said, the air, the surface water, the springs, the seas. So we're not in bed with these people. We're not doing anything they want us to do for y'all. It's a total hands-off. They have resources to hire me to come in and raise hell with the government. It's a really cool job. I do this with the military too. The Defense Department pays me to be a pain in their butt, because I help community groups understand what's going on, and I help them get a better cleanup. And I swear to goodness, that's what I do in this role. And if anybody thinks there's any kind of thing about selling out, these people have got no money. They're not getting any money.
I'm a pain in the butt for free.
Even better. I mean, we're just trying to get this, we're trying to help EPA do what community wants.
Okay, let's let this man ask his last question, and then,
My name is Larry Rice. I first want to start out with talking about the EPA mission statement. I don't want to burn my whole minute on it. But I've been very amazed about their admirable approach about what they want to do, what their mission statement. When you read their website, you look at what their goal and their ambition is to help the equality and the health care of our community to the people and to their well-being, to know what their mission statement is, and the objective they will take for the communities. It's very moving. But what is alarming is I am Larry Rice. I live 50 feet from the property line with the two young children that have played in the creek for the last 7 or 8 years. It's horrifying as a father today to realize, no kids, you can't go outside and ride your dune buggies and your four-wheel on those trails that my grandfather has made with the wagons and the mules back in the time when we thought we could plow the land and work the land and provide for our families. My question is I get these facts and realize that from 2007, you have known that my family has lived here with contamination waste. I still live there within 50 feet from this property line, and you want to tell me that it's safe for me to live there while you've moved 13 other families? That is my question. Glenn, I offered you personally, come have a barbecue and sit in my yard. Let's have some fellowship. I took a liking to you. I like you. So Matthew, you've been in my home in Angela. You've got a warm presentation of yourself. You're the kind of people I want to make friendship with. But I want to understand, how can you leave my family in this environment and contamination waste? That's my question. And thank you for the minute.
Thank you so much for speaking, Larry, and my heart again goes out to you as well as to Terry. And we did air testing in your house 2 separate times.
I don't believe those are accurate, though. I just do not believe they can be accurate today.
The 2 separate times were below our removal actions, and yes, we are going to do them again.
Thank you,
We
ma'am.
are going to do them again.
30 seconds. Hey, my name is Angela Miller. I'm a community involvement coordinator with EPA. I've been doing this for about 16 years, and the one thing that I would really like to say to you guys, I know there's 2 different community groups. I work with both of them. I made friendships on both sides. All I can say is you guys have the same agenda. You live in the same community, and you would be amazed at how much you could get done if you could come together and work together as one group. You would be such a powerful voice to CTS, to EPA, to politicians, to whatever. So that's just my 30 seconds.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming tonight. You're welcome to come up, ask questions of our panelists. I really want to thank all the panelists that have attended, and they will turn the air conditioning off in like 30 seconds, but come on up, we'll chat for a few minutes, and thank you again for coming out.